Harry Sisson, political commentator, Democratic supporter, and Brilyan HOLLYHAND is a Republican political commentator and the author of the book, One Generation Away, Why Now is the Time to Restore American Freedom. Thank you both so much for coming on. Brilyan, I'll start with you. So it seems to me the president speaking to Tim Walz and Mayor Frey, sending in Homan, arguably sidelining Noem, now Bovino leaving, being demoted. Is this an admission that what was happening wasn't working in Minnesota?
No, it's an admission that we can adapt and we can actually listen to the American people and do something about that. Let's just break this down. What happened to Alex Preddy was tragic. What happened to Renee Good was tragic. What also happened to Laken Riley was tragic as well. And I'm not in a cult. I can admit that all three things are bad. But there's a big difference between Laken Riley, somebody who was a college student on her afternoon jog, who was murdered and raped by illegal immigrants, and then the two other victims that you mentioned tonight who were being fundraised off of by the Democrat Party. They were not innocent civilians on their afternoon jog. They were both members of group chats, organized criminal operations to track down, to dox ICE officers, and then to go forcibly prevent them from arresting the same illegals that went and killed innocent Laken Riley.
Brilyan, just a question, just to jump in. This
Please.
Announcement is not happening after Renee Good. It's happening after Alex Preddy. It seems to me the president is not jumping on this idea that he was a domestic terrorist and says there needs to be an independent investigation. Doesn't that seem to you that the messaging would suggest it may be harder to defend that shooting than Renee Good?
Yeah, I don't think he was a domestic terrorist. I think he was just an American that bought into this idea that we're supposed to feel guilty for our country instead of feel gratitude. And his response to that was to go out and to try to prevent this. Listen, I've survived 19 years in America without being shot by ICE. It's not too complicated. I haven't tried to run them over with vehicles. I haven't tried to bite their fingers off. And I haven't tried to prevent them from arresting illegal immigrants. It's not a crazy concept.
So, Harry, I'm going to turn over to you. Obviously, you can respond to what Brilyan said, but it seems to me the other way, right? Is stepping away from the automatic defense of the Preddy shooting. That's my take. That he said on Truth Social that Tim Walz is encouraging cooperation and that Tim Walz understood they're looking for criminals in the state. If this ends with local and state authorities working with the feds on apprehending illegal immigrants, wouldn't the president get exactly what he wanted? Because from the beginning he said, look, we wouldn't bring in federal forces if local and state authorities were doing the job. If this is what he gets, cooperation in terms of removing illegal immigrants, wouldn't the president be winning on this?
No, I don't think so at all. I think Donald Trump's vision is far worse than it stands right now. I think if Donald Trump could have his way, he would have ICE in every major city doing what they're doing in Minnesota. So if ICE is pulled out and there's some cooperation by local authorities and the federal government, that won't necessarily be a win for Donald Trump. That'll be a win for the people in Minnesota who got ICE out after they witnessed two of their neighbors, their fellow Americans, be murdered in broad daylight, execution style, by this group that Donald Trump is sending into the state.
But, Harry, just to follow up on that, couldn't you also say that some of the rhetoric that we're hearing, I mean, Tim Walz comparing, ICE agents or federal authorities to essentially Nazis. I mean, he said that the children in Minnesota are like Anne Frank. That's the kind of language that escalates this. And maybe there's an argument as well, the idea of whether or not the federal agents should have opened fire. We can have a long debate about that. But there's another question of, why was Renee Good where she was? Why was Mr. Preddy where he was? You couple that with the idea of people going into the church. Is there an escalation that wasn't necessary? Is there language that is just making this whole situation worse?
I mean, look, I think when you're looking at something as sensitive as this, people are going to say things they don't mean. Rhetoric might escalate, but we have to look at the facts. What is ICE doing that is causing people to have this reaction? They're going door to door, asking people for their papers, even American citizens. They're, in some cases, detaining American citizens when they're showing them their ID or some proof of citizenship. These people out in Minnesota are not doing this for fun. They're not doing this because they want to have a fun Sunday afternoon. They're doing this out of necessity. They want to protect themselves, their neighbors, their friends. And if that's an escalation, I think that's a risk that the people are willing to take to protect themselves and their loved ones. And just to be clear, I mean, we're talking about, in my view, broad daylight murder. This is not, a skirmish between ICE and people on the ground and then everybody separated and they're okay. Two people died. They're not going to go home tonight and see their family, friends, and loved ones. And the people in Minnesota, I think, are responding appropriately. And they're not escalating. It's Donald Trump and ICE who are behaving in this way. They did not need to have 8 ICE agents push Alex Preddy to the floor. They didn't need to do that. They did anyway.
So Brilyan, here's the thing. I think a lot of us would agree, if everything was calmed down, if there was potential cooperation between local and state authorities and the feds, that feels like it would be a good thing. The problem is, how can there be trust? And I believe Mayor Fry had said that they don't have trust for the federal government. I mean, this is the idea that they immediately branded, or certain individuals immediately branded Preddy a threat or a terrorist. A judge had to block the feds from destroying evidence in the shooting. Now, there was a counter-argument from the feds saying, we wouldn't do that. But the idea that they have to petition a court, we're concerned that, evidence might be destroyed. I cover investigations all the time. I've never seen there's usually cooperation on that sense. So do you think that there was that there really can't be this coordination or cooperation because of a lack of trust that was built up by the administration?
Well, there should be cooperation, and there would never be this rhetoric in the first place to tone down if Tim Walz didn't get behind his podium and encourage his citizens to go out there. And then when they do get in the face of ICE officers, when they do run them over, when they do bite their fingers off, today he tweeted that he's never been prouder of his state. I want to respond to a claim that Harry made. ICE is in all 50 states. ICE has even done operations right here in Bright Red, Alabama, where I attend college. The problem and the chaos in the country has only been in Minnesota. So maybe ICE isn't the problem, but Minnesota is really the problem. He also wanted to talk a lot about deaths in this country. I didn't hear anybody mention the 56 deaths under Obama's administration, the 56 people under ICE custody. They all died. Did you see 56 protests in this country? Did you see 56 riots in this country? Did you see 56 social media hashtags? No, nobody cared. Why? Because that didn't fit their political narrative. This is all politics. They don't have good candidates. They don't have good policies. So they have to run off of victims and tragedies. And it's honestly sad.
Harry, I'm going to give you the final word. We've got 20 seconds.
Yeah, I'd love to. If you look at Obama's presidency, there were around, I believe, just above 50 deaths in his 8 years. In Donald Trump's first term, there was also around 50 deaths in ICE custody. In his first year, in this regime, there's been around over 30. So if you're just doing a comparative comparison between Obama and Trump in terms of the numbers and looking at the years, Donald Trump is far exceeding it. If we're at this rate, Donald Trump will have well over 100 deaths in ICE custody in his second term. So it's just not a comparison. And if you look at the policies, I know we don't have much time to dive into it, but they're just vastly different.
Well, here's the good news. I just started a new show. I think you two are great together. You're the next generation. I sound like an old guy. Back in my day, I heard people just like you. No, but Harry Sisson, Brilyan, HOLLYHAND, really, you guys were great. Would love to have you both back.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, Jesse.
Of course. All right.
Thanks, Jesse.
Got to